Alright everyone, welcome back to another Star Wars Galaxy of Heroes video with Fat Phil, and today we're going to be talking about 5 resources that I have a lot of fear about, that just, as I look into next year, the economy for these resources I feel is at a very dangerous place, because they're super important to the game, obviously, but also because the need for them has continued to grow, and the economy hasn't really grown with it. Think about it like this. You know, right now where we're living in with the cost of groceries is insane. That the cost of groceries has risen astronomically in the United States, but your salary and hourly pay is not following that same trend, and so people are having a tougher time making ends meet. Well, it's the same thing with Galaxy of Heroes, right? That's supply and demand. If you increase the demand but not the supply, we're in trouble. So I want to kind of use that framework here as we talk about these. Let's give a shout out to our channel members for their continued support. If you're ever interested, link down below along with a link to Discord. But the most important thing you guys can do, please subscribe to this channel, like this video. That helps me get out to more people. I really want to hit 10,000 subscribers in 2025. This year I really dropped the ball on trying to push that. I want to push that more in 2025. So we're going to try and hit 10,000. Let's see if we can get there, guys. Thank you again. Let's get in here to the game. Let's talk about these resources. All right, folks, so the first one is going to be Fleet Arena, right? And particularly crystals, right? And we'll talk about this. So Fleet Arena right now feels like Squad Arena did before the Grand Arena change. That when that Grand Arena change happened, characters like Jedi Master Kenobi and Lord Vader were the two most recent galactic legends that were kind of ruling the meta at the top of Squad Arena. And particularly with Kenobi, when he came into the game, it stopped a lot of the other galactic legends from climbing. In fact, the only GL that was really contending with Kenobi that from the original ones was Jedi Master Luke. You could use Sith Eternal with Armorer to help climb, and that stymied for a little bit until Lord Vader came into the fray, and then it was you needed JML or you needed one of the two new guys. And what happened was it was great for everybody who had those characters. Or if you had like JML, you could kind of off-meta climb, but then you were a target, right? You would get climbed on more than everybody else. But if you had Kenobi, it didn't matter whether that was your only GL or whether that was your 6th one. You could climb on anyone. And that's kind of the way that Fleet Arena feels right now. With all of these changes they've tried to make to Leviathan and the meta, all it's really done is made it super easy to climb with Leviathan, right? It's basically unlosable. You have maybe one player or two player who climb with just a profundity, but realistically, everybody's using Leviathan. It's an unlosable mirror match, and so a player like Copman, who's got a full, Relic 9 Sith fleet, I think, right? So he's got almost, yeah. Okay, Maul's only Relic 7, but you think he's got Relic 9s here. Look, like he's got a lot of extra relics. His fleet is just as good as mine on defense because the AI isn't smart enough. And thank God it isn't, because that would be miserable, right? But this kind of reminds me of the time when they made that change took the crystals away, is, hey, we don't like that a player like Fat Phil is beating players who have way more invested in the game or getting the same rewards simply because he built this one thing. That was the whole Grand Arena switch, was we need you to build more to get the same benefit. So I get that feeling. And the problem is removing crystals doesn't solve the problem for a lot of players. For maybe Copman, yeah, it doesn't matter. But for a lot of you, the reason that doesn't solve the problem is because of Zeta materials. Think about the prizes here. There's a lot of extra Zetas on the table for getting into first place, particularly as you get down into some of the lower levels here, right? Many of you could be like, oh, it's not that much, but the difference between getting, say, 21st and getting first is 500 currency, which is an extra Zeta every 4 days, or about 90 a year. Are you willing to give up 90 Zetas over the course, 90 Zeta mats over the course of a year? Like, no way. Most of you, you're so starved for them, you're going to take every little Zeta you can get. So I don't know that removing Zetas, removing crystals is the answer for Fleet Arena, but I do have fear over, crystals. Like, it is a resource that kind of scares me a little bit because a lot of players need them, and depending on where they go, that could completely change the way a lot of farming works. Because if all of a sudden they're like, hey, we are taking them out of Fleet Arena, and they're going to somewhere else, rushing Executor might not be the answer, and that could devastate the free-to-play farming community with all the guides that have been published. So again, it is, crystals is kind of the real resource here, but we talked about Zetas, and that's where we're heading next. The Zeta Economy. The amount of fear I have over the Zeta Economy cannot be understated. And that's because the amount of characters that are getting released now who need multiple Zetas is at an all-time high. Almost every single new character every character needs 1 Zeta, but a lot need 2, and most of your conquest characters need 2 to 3. And journey guides are 2 to 3. Like, it's astronomical. These galactic legends needing 6. Like, it is crazy. And those Zetas that are getting released, for some players in this game who don't quite have the access yet, they fall so far behind on them because Zetas are a time bottleneck, right? They're not, you can maybe pay sometimes here and there, but a lot of times it's just bottlenecked by time. And this economy could be in trouble because players are going to feel years behind simply because of all the Lightspeed bundles that have been released, because of all the new characters. It's really challenging. So the question becomes, well, how would you make this better, right? Because you could put the extra, hey, we're going to just give you more prizes inside of Fleet Arena. But again, very similar to the crystals, like, that's not going to stop these fleet shards from being what they are. That's not going to solve the problem for a lot of free-to-play. So I think the answer would be, you've got to increase the challenges, right? Maybe increase this to, I don't know if you would put 2, that would be a bit extreme, but maybe you make this, hey, you get 3 attempts at these fleet things, something like that. Because the Zeta Economy has not really moved since inception. They really haven't changed the Zeta Economy in terms of what you can and can't get. And what's kind of scary about that, for me especially, is they are something that, like, come in 2025, maybe they start selling those packs like a lot of people are thinking is going to happen. And if you aren't willing to whale on those, man, like, it's, you're going to, you fucked around and you're about to find out again, right? But here's kind of one of the things I did want to share is that, like, I'll use my account, for example, right? So we're going to just show you this real quick. So I have 300 Zetas on Swago.gg, right? So I have 300 Zetas. The biggest account in the game has 380. So you think there are 380 Zetas total in this game. That is an insane number. You think I'm 80 behind that, right? And I have a lot. I feel like I have a lot of Zetas. So just food for thought for you, and why I think this is an economy that you could change and not impact the end game and not make it easier for guys to progress, right? You're not going to, like, if you change the Zeta challenges, which is, I think, the best thing to do, like, that could be so beneficial for the game, because when you go here and you say, oh, we're just going to increase this, doesn't help most of us. And that's a good thing, right? Because what you don't want to do is increase an economy that helps every single player in the game. Because if you give us more fleet currency that I can turn to shard shop currency that allows me to get gear faster and all these other things, like, there's unseen consequences of every action, and maybe just increasing the challenges is an easy way that it's not too impactful. It's not giving me something that is going to give me a massive advantage over everybody else, right? And for a lot of players in that end game, it's a nothing change, so it doesn't impact them. One that would really be an impact is mods. So with Lightspeed bundles, obviously this is a problem. But I think for me, I'm more looking at it like not just like the end game or, Lightspeed bundles, but they changed the early game. You move a lot more quickly through this game now. There's a lot more GP that comes faster with the gear changes and the character shard changes. They've never gone back and adjusted the mod change. Sure, you've got Smuggler's Run 1 and Smuggler's Run 2, but those only give health mods. What about all the other sets? So for a lot of these players in the early game, they get all of these characters and they don't really have the means to mod them or mod them well. And it's not just that you need the mods, but they need to be quality now, that your account needs better and better mods to keep up with content, to get through combat missions and territory battles, and or I guess territory battles is, get through every other aspect of this game. You need really good mods. So this is not just an end game problem. This is for a lot of players in the early game. You're experiencing this where you're like, I don't have good enough mods and I can't get them fast enough. This is, unlike Zetas, you can't just say, let's double drop all mod stuff. Because the impact that giving us double drops on mods has to an account like mine is far more significant than what it might have for you. Because for a lot of you, you just need to acquire mods, right? You just need to get those mods. But now you're giving me an opportunity to increase my already insane mod inventory to a level that many of you can't get to, right? So I don't think the mod slicing materials is where I would be more focusing, but I would focus on mod challenges. If you don't change the way that mod challenges work and the amount of mods you get out of here, there's going to be a huge bottleneck for mods that is almost going to be irreversible. And you could say, oh, well, all fixes itself in time. But think about that for a lot of us who played this game, mod challenges existed long before mod slicing did. So we had how many years of playing this game where all you had to do was just farm mods and farm mods and farm mods. So, you know, I'm just playing devil's advocate a little bit there, that I think it might be time to revisit mod challenges and increase the number of mods you get out of here. And that way players can spend more of that energy trying to, you know, catch up on mod slicing materials, which in the end game are the biggest impact to your account. And that way you're not giving an unfair advantage to somebody like me with slicing. Sure, I'm going to get just as many mods as you are if I farm challenges, but I need far more quality mods out of the mod challenges than you do, right? Like a 10 speed mod, it's not really going to help most of my characters. A 10 speed mod could help a lot of you right now. So that's why I'm thinking avoid the battles and look at the challenges as the way to, you know, relieve that economy. Because if that doesn't change, there's going to be a lot of players, I think, that are going to struggle to get through different events because they just don't have the mods to do it. And that's a problem, right? Like, that is something that I feel like has been overlooked for far too long now. All right, next is Relic 8 materials. Not Relic 9 as much as it is the Relic 8s. Relic 8 materials are something that I think, unfortunately, are really getting out of hand. And it's because you need them not just to go from Relic 7 to Relic 8, but you need them to go from Relic 8 to Relic 9. It's this double hit. And the issue I have with them is that for most players in this game, especially this year, between all the Ahsoka requirements, they've released more Relic 8 materials that are required of you than you can realistically get in a year without, now again, without spending your raid currency, right? That you have to spend your raid currency to get these air magnifiers. But there's no, you know, you don't get the impulse. If you just said, hey, I'm not going to, you know, I'm only going to purchase raid currency with, you know, air magnifiers to keep up. Well, then where are you getting impulse detectors from? Like, it's just this very hard bottleneck that because of the way they've structured relics and this need for all these relics at every single level through the whole thing, it's a massive challenge for a lot of players in this game to get the right balance between air magnifiers, impulse detectors, and all these other resources. But I think especially with the Relic 8s, it's a big challenge because they've never really made air magnifiers much more accessible. And you could say, oh, well, in the raid, it's a lot, you know, easier to get them. But think back to the challenge pit days. That was the only reward you got was air magnifiers. So, you know, your growth now is faster, but because your growth is faster, that what your need for Relic 8, the time you can get there, is also faster. So it's one of those things where you're going to see a lot of accounts with, you know, probably a lot of Relic 7s, but then those Relic 8s are going to start piling up that they need to get there and they don't have the resources to do it. So I would be very curious to see what happens with these. And again, if some big change happens to Relic 8s, that's my cue that Relic 9, you know, that Relic 10 is coming. If they start fixing Relic 8, that's when I think Relic 10 happens. But I do think that we need something just a little bit more where we could get these impulse detectors somewhere. Even if it's just a simple change as throwing them, you know, hey, we're going to add challenge tier 4 and we're going to throw on some of those later stage relic materials like they did with the Battle for Naboo and Peridia Patrol, where you can earn, Duel of the Fates and Peridia Patrol, where you can earn those, you know, high level relic materials. I think that's great, but I think that should have happened with some of the other assault battles simply because the need for them is so extensive. And that goes beyond just the whole required characters, but also think about territory battles. More guilds are getting to those planets and have needs there. So I think that is something that I do have some fear over. If you continue to release these Relic 8 and 9 requirements, it's going to get out of hand and players are going to fall really far behind. And then the last one here is signal data. Now this can kind of go hand in hand with Relic 8s, But I think even more so with signal data, where I'm getting fearful is that characters keep getting added to the Cantina, right? We had Great Mothers. We had Morgan. You had, the Captain Drogon got entered here. We got the, Cal Kestis characters here. The Mark 6 Interceptor for Leviathan. There's a lot of good characters that are inside of the Cantina. But the problem is the only place you can earn signal data through farming a node is the Cantina. So I have this fear that as characters continue to get added back into the Cantina, and the characters that are new, because when it was just these older characters that have been getting phased out, so characters like Great Mothers and Morgan can make their entrance here, as that has happened, we're now kind of approaching this point where it's getting harder and harder to accumulate signal data early. My suggestion here, and this is a tough one to do, but I think you could make it happen. For these 16 energy nodes, what I think could be super beneficial, right? That's level 7 and level 8 here. When you go to the signal data node, see how it's a drop of 2, right? It says hey, there's a chance to get 2 of these. What I think would be really cool is that on these 16 energy nodes, if you made a couple of them drop blue signal data, a couple of them drop the green, and a couple of them drop white. But you keep drop rates the same, right? Whatever the drop rates are for these, you keep them the same, but you just shrink this to 1. So that way it's halved. That yes, you can earn character shards, and you're going to earn half as much signal data as if you were farming that node. There's not that many characters here, but there's enough that you're going to be farming for a little bit in here, right? There's a lot of stuff. And I think if you made that change, it's going to allow players to feel a little bit better about farming some of these guys out of the Cantina, and could help offset. Because once you get down into these earlier tiers, I think the problem becomes you'd either have to adjust the drop rate significantly. Because you think if you did that on the 8 energy nodes, anybody with half a brain would farm this node where there's 2 characters on it, right? I'm going to farm 2 characters with 8 Cantina energy. Hey, there's a half drop of signal data here, which is basically the equivalent of this one up here. So you'd have to do some drop rate adjustments to get the desired effect, to make sure that the drop rate of signal data on an 8 energy node is half of, with the full energy in mind and everything, is half of what you would get if you were actually farming the node. So just something that I thought could be cool, of trying to come up with a way to keep signal data only in the Cantina, but allow you to maybe farm some characters along with it. And I think that could be really cool. Just something that would help players coming into the game catch up to where you want them to be. Because you're putting in all these mechanics to get them 7-star faster, but there's not a lot of stuff to move them through relics faster. And I think trying to change signal data would be a big part of that. So let me know your thoughts down below. Again, like, subscribe, comment. I love you all. May the force be with you, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers, my friends.